and top of the morning to y'all. This is a seasonal storm. My name is Jess, and today we are making a 2-hour long make time Instapot corned beef and cabbage. In addition to watching today's cooking tutorial, I'd like to invite you all to hear today the story not only of corned beef, but of the Irish immigration to America and the immigration of my very own ancestors. Thanks for coming along, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. What you will need for this is a corned beef, pre-brined in the bag like so. We are cheating, I know, but you can also get a brisket and do it the old-fashioned way if you want to, but we are all limited on time. This one is 3.5 pounds. It cost me $10 at my local Kroger grocery store. Next, what we will need in our vegetable matters is a head of cabbage. This one cost, I think, 99 cents. Or no, this is 59 cents a pound. So probably about 99 cents. And then 1 onion. This one came from our local onion grower, Peri's, out of Yerington, Nevada. So definitely support your local farmers and ag. And then we need a 89-cent bag of carrots. We are again going the cheater route, so I'm using canned whole white potatoes. You can also use red skin potatoes. Those are probably preferable, but I'm using what I have on hand. These are 50 cents a can, and I will be using 3 cans. And then for our stock, a lot of people just use water with their vegetables. I am choosing not to. I would prefer a more flavorful corned beef, so I'm using beef stock. And this is, I think, $1 a little jug of these. And then to finish it off, we are using an Irish beer. This is George Killian's Irish Red. And I don't drink beer, but I do know, well, I was in college once, we all were. I don't drink very often anymore, but I do know when cooking with beer, you would rather have a dark beer rather than a light beer. So a draft, a lager, or an ale, or a stout are all of your better picks rather than something lighter like an IPA. I do not recommend that ever. Please do not try that. So first things we're gonna do is we're gonna put 4 cups first of liquid stocks into our pot. Then we will rest our corned beef on the stand, our little rack inside of our Instapot, and then we will cover it with our veggies, and then we will get started from there. So I will change the angle and bring you all along. We're going to start today by adding our beef broth and our beer to the bottom of our pot, and then resting our corned beef on the rack in the bottom of the pot before we start to add our vegetables and other seasonings. So, corned beef. What is it and why do the Irish eat it? Well, the Irish haven't exactly always eaten it. Ireland started with deep pagan and Druidic roots, and cows were considered a sacred animal and a symbol of wealth. They were sacred because of the sustenance that their dairy products provided back to the community. Therefore, cows were only eaten at the end of their life, and their meat was preserved with something known as sea ash, which is when you take seaweed and burn it in order to create a preservative material. That is why the likely foods you've heard of in Ireland or Irish cuisine are more like lamb and pork. We're going to go ahead and put our corned beef onto our rack now before we start to chop up our vegetables. The history of beef in Ireland also coincides with the history of occupation in Ireland, primarily by the British. To explain more about that, we're going to talk about the Cadillacs. To explain this, I'd like to read something written by the Smithsonian Museum. So, and quote, herds of cattle were exported by the tens of thousands each year from Ireland to England, but the Cadillacs of 1663 and 1667 were what fueled the Irish corned beef industry. These acts prohibited the export of live cattle to England, which drastically flooded the Irish market and lowered the cost of meat available for salted beef production. The British invented the term corned beef in the 17th century to describe the size of the salt crystals used to cure the meat. They were the size of corn kernels, hence corned beef. After the Cadillacs, salt was the main reason Ireland became a hub for corned beef. Ireland's salt tax was almost 1/10 that of England's and could import the highest quality at the most inexpensive price. With large quantities of cattle and a high quality of salt, Irish corned beef was the best on the market, and it didn't take long for Ireland to be supplying Europe and the Americas with its wares. Ironically, the ones producing the corned beef could not afford the beef nor the corned beef for themselves. When England conquered Ireland, oppressive laws against the native Irish Catholic population began, and their land was confiscated and feudal-like plantations were set up. If the Irish could afford any meat at all, it was only salted pork or bacon. What the Irish really relied on was the potato. The potato was introduced from the Americas, as we all know, and is not a native product to Europe. Over the next 50 years, the glory days of the Irish corned beef industry were over, and by 1845, a potato blight, or a great famine, broke out all over Ireland, completely destroying the main food source for most of the Irish population. Without the help of the British government, the Irish people were forced to work to death, starve, or to immigrate. About 1 million people died and another 1 million immigrated on coffin ships to the United States, and to this day, the Irish population is still less in Ireland than it was before the Great Famine. This is why so many Irish American immigrants now live in America today. Once more from Smithsonian, the Irish were once again faced with the challenges of prejudice, and to make it easier, they settled together in mainly urban areas on the American East Coast, with the largest numbers being in New York City. They were now making more money than they had in Ireland under British rule, which brings us back to our original point, corned beef. With more money for food, the Irish could finally afford meat. But instead of beloved bacon and pork, the Irish began eating beef, and the beef they could afford just happened to be the very same corned beef that their great-grandparents were famous for. So there you have it. The Irish immigrants brought their meat solely from kosher butchers in New York City. What we think of today as Irish corned beef is actually Jewish corned beef thrown into a pot with cabbage and potatoes. The Jewish population in New York City at the time were relatively new immigrants from Eastern and Central Europe as well, and the corned beef they made was from brisket, a kosher cut of meat from the front of the cow. Since brisket is tougher cut, the salting and cooking processes transform the meat into an extremely tender, flavorful corned beef that we know of today. So thanks to immigration and immigrants coming to this country in search of a new life, a new dish was found, and one that we all cherish every year at St. Patrick's Day. So after we lock our lid, we're going to go to our pressure cook setting, and we're going to pressure cook for 70 minutes, so 1 hour and 10 minutes on high pressure, and then we are going to natural release for 15 minutes. So let's set our timer for 110, and I think that it will just go. There we go, perfect. So we will see it in about 1 hour and 25 minutes. Okay, party people, moment of truth. So I did 1 hour and 10 minutes, and then we did 32 minutes of natural release. So we're gonna open this. Now it will likely steam up a little bit, so just be advised. Oh, there's the steam. How are we looking? Oh yes. So as you can see, we've cooked down a lot of the broth. Our cabbage is very well cooked down. Some people might not like it that cooked down, but I do. And our meat has that beautiful bright red color. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and pull this onto our cutting board and cut it and see how we're looking. So we'll be right back. So we've got that really beautiful bright red, rich color that our corned beef should have. And it's definitely that nice red inside. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna taste test, of course, as one must. Yeah, it's falling apart so nicely. Yep. So, we are gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put this back in our big vat, right? And we're gonna just let it stay warm and slow cook until we're ready for dinner. So as we sit down to enjoy this quick and easy meal that we made, I hope that we all reflect back on our histories and how all of our ancestors made it to this country and the great ordeals and blights that they came through to make it here. We are so blessed today, and we all have so much more than they had then. So happy St. Patrick's Day, or Benach Tí na Fíle Pádraig Ort. Blessings on you for St. Patrick's Day, and I hope to see you all in videos in the future. Thanks for stopping by today and sharing a moment of my culture. Thank you.